It shouldn't be surprising that running backs and good offenses score fantasy points, but I wanted to look into the exact details, the exact numbers, and honestly, it made me update my rankings, which we'll talk about later. But if we're looking over the past 21 seasons, and we are looking at the starting running back for every bottom 5 offense in the NFL in scoring versus every top 5 offense in the NFL in scoring, you will see that if you're in a bottom 5 offense, you only have a 43% chance of being a top 24 running back in fantasy, as opposed to an 80% chance if you are in an elite offense. You have an 18% chance to be a top 12 running back in a garbage offense, as opposed to a 52% chance in an elite offense. You have a 28% chance of being a top 5 running back in an elite offense, as opposed to only a 5% chance of being that top 5 running back in a garbage offense. And if you're going to be that, you have to be a Hall of Fame level running back. You have to be Derrick Henry. You have to be Adrian Peterson, or you have to pull out the most miracle season ever and be Peyton Hillis. So when we're looking at running backs that can possibly be vaulted up due to their situations this year, we are going to be pulling sportsbook data of how they are projecting NFL offenses to score. Hayden Winks put this together very nicely that we can look at very clearly. And there are not just 5 teams that have a shot to be the top 5 scoring offense in the NFL, right? We can't predict this with 100% accuracy. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at the running back situation for every team that sportsbooks are telling us they have a chance to be top 5. That's going to be Buffalo, Baltimore, San Francisco, the Rams, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Commanders, the Eagles, the Cardinals, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Green Bay Packers. At least that's what sportsbooks are putting as teams projected to score about 23 points per game or more. But starting off with the team that projects to score the most points in the NFL, we are going to be looking at James Cook. Now, full transparency, in underdog drafts early this offseason, James Cook was going at the very beginning of the 4th round, and I opted instead to be taking players like Alvin Kamara at the end of the 5th or the beginning of the 6th. However, we've actually seen James Cook in underdog drafts slide back just a bit as people were concerned about the contract situation. And I've been buying the dip on Cook, especially as we've seen the running backs like Chuba Hubbard and Alvin Kamara become closer to early 5th round picks as opposed to late 5th rounders. So I don't have a ton of James Cook up until this point. However, I will be targeting him aggressively if I can get him at the end of the 4th in best ball drafts or the beginning of the 4th in your regular redraft league. Now, if we're going to look at James Cook through his NFL career so far, it has really just been, the exact same thing. We know what to expect from 2023 to 2024 with his usage numbers, because you had 13.9 carries per game, falling down to 12.9 year over year. You had 3.2 targets per game, falling down to 2.4 targets per game. But realistically, we know we should expect about 13, 14 carries a game. We should expect about 2 to 3 targets per game. We know that workload's consistent. We've seen it for 2 years now. The only difference that we've really had for James Cook and what vaulted him up from only averaging 13.7 fantasy points per game in 2023 up to 16.7 points per game in 2024 was the touchdown column. And it wasn't just touchdowns, because on the site, we can actually track rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line as well. So if you look at the player comparison on flockfantasy.com, you'll see that James Cook in 2023 only had 0.29 carries inside the 5-yard line, which actually ranked 43rd in the NFL. As opposed to 2024, James Cook had 0.94 carries inside the 5-yard line, which ranked 12th in the league. This jumped his total touchdown mark up from 0.35 to 1.13. Now, just the law of averages, the law of natural numbers, I would expect that James Cook actually lands somewhere in the middle between these two numbers. And I would expect James Cook to be much better at scoring touchdowns than he was 2 years ago. But probably the Bills aren't going to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns by a wide margin this year. So I'd expect maybe a few of those touchdowns to go through the air. Now, I understand that we've had people in the comment section going, how can you just say that we can assume that, blah, 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 blah. Don't you need to get into the X's and O's? I'm a very simple guy. I can look over the past 5 years and look at a large sample of a Josh Allen-led offense and we can go, okay, typically we should expect a few more passing touchdowns than rushing TDs, and then look at an outlier season in 2024 that doesn't match that trend and go, you know what? We're probably going to assume that it falls back on the 4-year trend versus the 1-year past season. So with Cook, I wouldn't be drafting him as like a top 10 running back by any stretch of the imagination. I was surprised to see on flockfantasy.com with the expert average rankings. These aren't mine. This is the expert average. People are drafting Alvin Kamara ahead of James Cook right now, which I personally would not do. Again, like I said, early in the offseason, I was taking Alvin Kamara at the discount at the end of the 5th, passing on James Cook at the beginning of the 4th. But if they're close together in drafts, based on the historical data that we have about these offenses, I definitely think you should be going with James Cook. Now, going over and looking at Derrick Henry, the Baltimore Ravens project to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this season. And obviously, I should be scared because I have not drafted much Derrick Henry at all. And we can go through and we can look at Derrick Henry in 2024, posting the best season that he had since 2020. It was almost a career year for Derrick Henry. The man averaged 113 rushing yards per game. 5.9 yards per rushing attempt was the best mark in his NFL career. And at the same time, it was the third best mark in the entire NFL. And this is a running back that was averaging 19 carries per game, right? So to have that type of efficiency with that type of volume is just unheard of. And we can all agree Derrick Henry is a Hall of Fame level running back, one of the most unique players that we have seen, at least since I've been playing fantasy football since about 2008. And you may ask, Mason, okay, he's in a great offense. He's coming off a career year. How could you possibly not draft him a ton this season? And the simple answer of this is Devon Achan's been going behind him all year now. Now, I haven't figured out where these running backs are going in ESPN and Yahoo drafts. I've just mainly been doing my best ball underdog drafts up until this point. And there, Devon Achan has been consistently behind Henry, where I'll take him ahead of him. It's nothing against Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry did only average 59% of the snaps for the Baltimore Ravens this past season. This was a game environment that was consistently skewed for Derrick Henry to just be able to run the ball over and over and over again. If the Ravens defense regresses any way whatsoever, we should expect that Justice Hill's the running back that's getting used on third downs. And if we were going to take out the games in which Tua missed for Devon Achan, Achan averaged 21.2 fantasy points per contest in comparison to Derrick Henry at 19.8. Devon Achan had 64% of the snaps, and he had over 6 targets per game in games where Tua played. So I'm going to go with the young ascending running back that was already better when his quarterback was healthy last season versus the running back that's 31 years old, even if he's set up in an elite level offense. But I'm never going to make fun of anybody. I'm never going to say that you can't draft Derrick Henry with where he goes. I just personally prefer Achan. And honestly, I may prefer Genty, even if the math doesn't say it. Now, McCaffrey's a super interesting case. I have McCaffrey ranked as my RB4 on the site, and I'm going to keep him there for sure. And I have drafted McCaffrey as one of my most owned running backs in Underdog drafts. Now, Underdog obviously is going to be different than your regular redraft league. Like in the Flock League, where if I get dead last, I'm going to get ridiculed all year long. It's going to be public humiliation. It's going to be a hell on earth, to be completely honest. There, I will be terrified to take Christian McCaffrey in round 1 because you've had one of two outcomes for Christian McCaffrey his entire NFL career. We can go through and look at his rookie season. He was the RB3. 2018, the RB2. 2019, the RB1. 2020, he gets injured. 2021, he gets injured. 2022, the RB2. 2023, the RB1. 2024, he gets injured. So Christian McCaffrey has either been a top 3 running back in fantasy or he's been injured his entire NFL career. And the ceiling for McCaffrey is untouchable in comparison to any other running back in fantasy. We can look at the last healthy McCaffrey season that we had in 2023 at 24.5 fantasy points per contest and compare this to Derrick Henry at 19.8 this past year, where Derrick Henry had a career year, but he still doesn't touch McCaffrey's. Barkley, 22.2 with his career season, doesn't touch McCaffrey. Jamir Gibbs, 21.3, does not touch McCaffrey. So if I'm like in an Underdog best ball draft where it's like a $5 buy-in, $100,000 first place prize, and I can look at this type of ceiling for McCaffrey, look at the Vegas Sportsbook projections, look at how easy the schedule is, I'm going to be drafting him any chance I get at pick 8 and beyond. However, when you get in your regular redraft league and you don't necessarily have to chase the highest ceiling possible and you maybe want a more secure round 1 pick, I'll be very scared. Like, honestly, I'm hoping that I get to pick my draft order. I hope I don't have to pick the 8 slot or the 9 slot or even the 7 slot, because I don't really want to take McCaffrey if I don't have to, because the downside risk is there, but the upside is unimaginable, which is why I'm taking him in those large field best ball contests. But obviously, if you wanted to get into one of those large field best ball contests, Underdog's been dropping like a ton of $3, $5 drafts, so you can actually practice for your drafting this year. And if you use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. You'll get all my 2025 fantasy football rankings and draft guide cheat sheets. And since Underdog's best ball, there's no time commitment at all during the season, so it's not going to replace your main fantasy football league. Will just be some extra fun on the side. Now, this is the main thing that I've changed with my rankings. Y'all know, going back to where we covered the bad offenses, I have moved Breece Hall below Kairen Williams in my rankings due to this data and due to this research. Kairen Williams has consistently been around 4 pick in Underdog drafts, where Breece Hall has been around 3 selection. But if we go through and look at Kairen Williams, not only do the Rams project to be a top 5 offense in the NFL, while yes, they drafted Blake Corum in round 3 last year, Blake Corum does nothing as a rookie. While yes, they take Hunter this year, they don't take Hunter until the 4th round. And we could say Jarquez Hunter is more likely than not going to be the receiving back. And what's very interesting is Kairen Williams averaged 17 points per game last year. He averaged 21 points per game the year prior. So if we look at the past 2 seasons, he's averaged 18.8 fantasy points per contest while only averaging 13 receiving yards per game, which marks 40th in the NFL among running backs. So Kairen Williams has already not been used as a receiver, and Kairen Williams over the past 2 years has been the RB4 in points per game. And what's very interesting is pull him up in the player comparison on flockfantasy.com, and you'll see that his snaps over the past 2 years just boat race any other running back in fantasy. Pull up all the elite running backs in fantasy at the moment. Look at Saquon Barkley this past year, 76% in comparison to Kairen Williams at 87%. Bijan Robinson, 76%. Jamir Gibbs, 56%. Derrick Henry, 59%. Kairen Williams is the only workhorse running back in the entire NFL at this point. So maybe Hunter does come in and have some work on third down, which is why I think a lot of people are discounting Kairen Williams and allowing us to draft him in the 4th. But I'm going to keep taking him. I didn't think he was good coming into the NFL as a rookie, but clearly I was so wrong. We were willing to admit that right when he blew up 2 years back. We drafted him a lot last offseason, and we're just going to keep taking him a lot this year because he's a workhorse running back and what projects to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. Now, going over and looking at Isaiah Pacheco, Pacheco right now in the expert average ranks on the sites like RB27. And to be completely honest with you, this is probably going to be a little too low just given the historical data that we have. Because if you are in a top 5 offense in the NFL, you have an 80% chance to post a top 24 running back season. Pacheco 2 years ago was the RB14. He played 61% of the snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs, 4.6 yards per rush attempt, 4.9 yards per attempt his rookie season. And obviously, Pacheco absolutely craters last year. He falls down to 43% of the snaps in 7 games played. I mean, hell, he falls from 15 fantasy points down to 8.13. And it's not just that the overall volume numbers got worse, but the efficiency was laughably bad. You actually had Isaiah Pacheco falling from a 15% juke rate, both in his rookie and second year, down to an 8%. An 8% juke rate is lower than any other running back we were going to look at in this entire video. He had that 4.6 yards per rush attempt fall down to 3.7. So Isaiah Pacheco was garbage in 2024, but it all comes down to, do you think it was due to the injury? If it was due to the injury, and Pacheco is just straight up the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, he's going to crush where he's getting drafted right now, at least in Underdog drafts, at least in comparison to where the experts on the site have him ranked. But I don't know what I've been doing, to be completely honest with you. And this is embarrassing to admit. Like, this is something I don't want to bring up, but I've been drafting some Kareem Hunt in round 18 just because I'm like, okay, there are going to be points scored in this Kansas City Chiefs backfield. And Pacheco wasn't a running back with a ton of pedigree. It's not like he ever had the Kairen Williams level breakout. So I'm fine drafting Pacheco. I'm very scared of the efficiency drop off this past year. I know a lot of people think the Chiefs offense is bad for whatever reason. It blows my mind that people are willing to say that. But I don't know. He could return value very easily. Brian Robinson could return value very easily as well, because Brian Robinson's getting drafted as an RB3 right now. However, if we're looking at sportsbook projections, you have the Commanders projected out to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. Now, the issue that you have with Brian Robinson is going to be very similar to maybe the issue with Isaiah Pacheco, is that Brian Robinson got a lot worse from 2023 to 2014. Like, if you go back to Brian Robinson's rookie season, he had a 28% juke rate. And this past year, that fell down to an 18%. If you look at Brian Robinson from a fantasy points perspective, 2023 was up at 13.2, which he was the RB22. That fell down to 11.4, where he was the RB29. Now, the good thing is he's been able to increase his snap percentage every single season of his NFL career. On top of this, Eckler's another year older. It's not like Washington brings in any notable running back. They definitely could have in the NFL draft if they wanted to. So Brian Robinson, I've been drafting aggressively as an RB3 just because I think if you have the Jaden Daniels-led Commanders as an elite offense, the probability is very high that Brian Robinson can at least be a top 24 back. Going over and looking at Jamir Gibbs, I don't want to talk about Gibbs much. Obviously, the Lions project out to be a very good offense this season. But honestly, we can throw Barkley in this list as well. Like, I'm not going to tell you, ooh, sneaky under the radar guy, just Saquon Barkley. Look at this math. Running backs and good offenses put up a lot of fantasy points. Ooh, sneaky under the radar running back, Jamir Gibbs. Look at this math, blah, blah, blah. These guys are locked and loaded into being top 5 to 6 picks in your fantasy draft. You already know they're great. You're not getting any type of discount. There's nothing to discuss. Now, going over and looking at James Conner, y'all know I drafted James Conner in the Flock League. He was really my only running back all year, and he came through for us in a big-time way. It was the first time that James Conner had ever played 16 games in his NFL career, which is a crazy thing to say when James Conner was drafted in 2017. So he's been in the league for 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. So before 2024, James Conner had 7 seasons of fewer than 16 games played. Now, James Conner puts up the best year of his NFL career from a games played perspective this past year. Also, the efficiency looks pretty damn good, a 33% juke rate. You look at the usage as a receiver, he got up to over an 11% team target share, which was only the 4th time he's done that in his entire career. Now, Trey Benson was a top 2 running back for most people in the NFL draft last season. So how I've been playing this backfield, to be completely honest with you, because you have to draft James Conner a lot higher than where we took him last year in the Flock League. I've been taking the cheaper alternative option, because if the Cardinals offense is good, like sportsbooks are projecting them out to be, there will be running back points scored here. But if we're having to draft James Conner as like a mid RB2 in fantasy, while he's coming off a phenomenal season, while the offense does project out to be well, while the offensive line should be better at the same time, you're going into your 8th NFL career as an injury-prone running back. I would probably rather just take the second-year potential breakout at a massive discount. Now, going over and looking at Chase Brown, we've already said it. This could be a top 3 running back this year. We look at weeks 9 through 17 when the Cincinnati Bengals had no other option but to just give Chase Brown the rock, and he dominated almost any other running back in fantasy. In weeks 9 through 17, he averaged 20.6 fantasy points per game, 86% of the snaps for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was top 10 in all of these categories during this time. PPR points per game, snap percentage, rush attempts, rushing yards, rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line, targets, receiving yards, total touchdowns, and total yards. He was used heavily as a receiver, heavily as a rusher, heavily at the goal line. They bring in Taj Brooks on day 3. Maybe Zach Moss is healthy, and maybe that's what Underdog sees that I don't, because I have Chase Brown ranked very aggressively, where in your regular redraft league, I have no problem you taking this guy at the 2-3 turn. Like if you're in an ESPN league where you start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, hell, go be extremely aggressive on Chase Brown. But it is interesting in that we go ahead and we look at Chase Brown with his Underdog pick'em projection. They have him at 5.5 higher, lower rushing touchdowns and only 849 rushing yards higher, lower. we can go through and compare this to another running back that we're talking about targeting. And you have Kairen Williams at higher lower 10.5 rushing touchdowns. Kairen Williams higher lower 1,024 rushing yards. So I don't know why the pick and projections are so low on Chase Brown. I typically try to avoid the higher than on Underdog season-long projections just because a player could always get injured. But that is an interesting mark for me. Now, going over and looking at the last running back in an offense that could be top 5, you have Josh Jacobs. Super high floor, super high ceiling. There's not much to discuss. I mean, y'all know I won $150K on Underdog back in the day because we flag planted and made Josh Jacobs our most drafted player. But looking at Jacobs coming off of his second best NFL season ever with 17 fantasy points per game. I mean, Josh Jacobs has played at least 15 games in 4 NFL seasons so far, and the fewest amount of games that he's ever played has been 13. You look at his higher lower, you're at 10.5 rushing touchdowns. You're at about 1,100 rushing yards. So you have a lot of security with Josh Jacobs, a very high ceiling. There's not much to discuss. Everybody's kind of on it. I think you can draft him in round 2 and be very happy. But I think that's all I got for you. I do want to reiterate like a couple different main takeaways that I'm going to have with this video. If you believe that Isaiah Pacheco and Brian Robinson had the efficiency drop off this past year due to their injuries and not a drop off in talent, then both of them could exceed greatly to the upside, operating under the assumption that their offenses will be good, which I personally want to believe that yes, the Commanders and the Kansas City Chiefs will be good offenses this season. Also, I'm going to be going ahead and looking at drafting a running back like Kairen Williams very aggressively in round 4 of Underdog drafts. In your regular redraft league, I'd be completely fine taking him in round 3 unless we get a ton of positive news coming out about Blake Corum in training camp. And then in terms of players that you can fade, it's very scary to fade any running back from offenses that project to be this good. I am a psychopath, so I've been fading Derrick Henry so I can go ahead and draft Devon Achane. But if you didn't want to do that, because yes, the Baltimore Ravens project to score a zillion points, I'm not going to fault you at all for it. But I think that's all I got for you. I really do appreciate you. I really hope I get a draft with you in the live stream later tonight. And if you're not already on Underdog getting those drafts, I'll leave a link in the description and comment section. Again, code FLOCK will give you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And on top of that, you'll get all our 2025 fantasy football rankings and draft guide cheat sheets. But appreciate you and really hope I get a draft with you tonight.